Hey guys, I am the Comics Kid 2099 and I wanted to talk about the upcoming movie X-Men Days of Future Past. It is coming out in, I believe, March of 2014. Recently we got a trailer for this movie. It was actually a week ago by the time this video goes up. It was 1 week ago. I wanted to talk about this movie. I'm not exactly doing a reaction video to the trailer. I know I've seen several people do that, and I'm not dissing what they are doing. I just don't really have a whole lot to say about the trailer. It looks pretty great. I'm pretty excited for this movie. Having said that, I am also very, very skeptical about this movie, and that will require a little bit of backstory. For those of you who have not been keeping up with this channel very long, or perhaps you have been and you just didn't get around to watching my X-Men film review rewrite video, I am a gigantic fan of the X-Men, and I've liked the comic books for about 13-ish years, but if anything, I maybe like the movies more. There was a time in my life, around the time when X-Men First Class came out actually, where I was not really reading X-Men comics. I had stopped reading single issues altogether, shortly before Second Coming actually, and I was still picking up older trades. I still do that sometimes, but I wasn't really interested in what was coming out in the present day at that point. So with X-Men First Class, I had this strong desire to see this movie not only be good, but I wanted it to be fantastic. And while I think it came pretty close, I'm not going to say that it was entirely perfect. I do think X-Men First Class, it is my favorite X-Men movie, but it is not perfect. It has some flaws, not just in the continuity of things. I know a lot of people like to talk about, well, this movie doesn't fit with what was said in X-Men 1. Yeah, there's a lot of that, but also just as a film, I feel like X-Men First Class had some logistical problems. So it was a very enjoyable film. I will definitely be watching it again in the future. It was not a perfect film, I don't think. But one thing, when I went to see X-Men First Class, I really liked what they did with Magneto up until the last 15 minutes of the movie. I really liked what they did with Professor Xavier, what they did with Beast, and what they did with Mystique. I really liked those characters. Then you had other characters like Angel and Darwin, who I really felt like were just kind of cannon fodder and or just needed to be there so that this could be a full-on team movie. And then you have characters like Havoc and Banshee, who once again, they were just there so that this could be a full-on team. And I really look forward to the day when we can just do, I don't know, a Gambit Solo movie, and we don't have to worry about putting in 5 or 6 characters into this movie to make it feel like an actual X-Men movie, when in reality, we don't need a full team to enjoy the movie. We can have a Gambit Solo movie without putting 5 or 6 nameless mutants in it, or maybe they are named mutants, maybe they're mutants that we don't really care about, but the studios still feel like they have to put those characters into the movie. I really look forward to the days when that can happen, but until then, it seems like even now we still can't really get away from that. And what I mean by that is, you look at X-Men First Class, and you had characters like Havoc and Banshee. Well, now, in the next movie, Days of Future Past, Banshee's not even going to be in that movie. Havoc is going to have even less to do, and I didn't even think that was possible when I watched First Class. And I don't really like that. I don't like that they basically just needed to fill out the movie a little bit, so they add these characters who clearly they do not care about, and you can see that they don't care about those characters because they are not getting their due in later movies. Now, it seems like this trend is going to continue even in Days of Future Past. We have had reports that Quicksilver, Warpath, Bishop, Blink, and Sunspot, and many more X-Men characters are going to be showing up in Days of Future Past. Some people, like myself, we are saying, well, this is just going to end up being something of a disaster because these characters, they are not very important to the story, but they are going to be taking up screen time that really should be going to characters who are important to the story. And then other people, I've heard at least a couple of people say, well, go back and watch X-Men 1. You had Kitty Pryde and Jubilee who were in that movie, but they didn't really have a whole lot to do in that movie. And that's true, both of those characters were in that movie, but the key difference is when you were watching X-Men 1 when it first came out, and you see Kitty Pryde on screen, you didn't immediately think, oh no, this ruins the chance to see her in a future movie. In fact, you get to see her do stuff in X-Men 3. Now, X-Men 3 is not a great movie at all, but you do get to see that character eventually start doing stuff. The same with Colossus, who had a very minor role in X-Men 2. You get to actually see him doing stuff in X-Men 3. The key difference is, when you start jumping around in time, that kind of ruins the chance to use that character again once you place a character at a certain time. So, for example, Gambit had a very, very minor role in X-Men Origins Wolverine. Arguably, he didn't even need to be in that movie, but he was in that movie. And so now you have Gambit. He has now been permanently pegged as existing somewhere in between 1978 or 1985, depending on when you think X-Men 1 is set and if the 5 Mile Island incident takes place in 1978 in the X-Men universe as it did in the real world. So now, if somebody wanted to do a Gambit movie, they would either have to ignore Gambit's appearance in X-Men Origins Wolverine and just say, let's have Gambit be set in the present day, or they would have to do a Gambit movie set in the late 70s, early 80s. And I feel like that kind of ruins the opportunity to do something really cool with Gambit. I think there are people out there, Bryan Singer, for example, said he would love to use Gambit in a future movie. I'm not sure if Bryan Singer would actually look at X-Men Origins Wolverine and say, okay, let's have the Gambit movie set immediately after that movie, or would he ignore that movie and just say, let's do a Gambit movie set in the present day where he has a thing for Rogue. And I feel like that is what is going on here. You have these characters who are only showing up in these movies because of fan service. The people behind these movies, they are looking at the fans and they are saying, okay, the fans want to see more characters show up on screen. So they say, let's put Callisto in X-Men 3, but she's only going to have 1 or 2 lines, and then she's going to randomly have a rivalry with Storm, but it's not going to make any sense in the context of this movie like it does in the context of the comic books. And this has been going on really this entire time, but it's become much more problematic once the movies started jumping around in time. I don't want to see my favorite X-Men characters show up on screen if they are going to be done badly. Now, Callisto is a character I don't especially care about. I like her okay, but she's not a favorite of mine. However, if I was a Callisto fan, I would be pretty upset that she was used in X-Men 3, and now you're not going to see that character again in these movies unless they do a full-on reboot. And if they do, well then that's another topic for another day. I feel like when you have characters like Warpath and Bishop and Sunspot and Quicksilver, those characters, for the most part, could sustain a movie. You could actually do some interesting things with those characters in a movie, but instead they are going to have maybe 2 minutes of screen time in X-Men Days of Future Past just because someone somewhere said, oh, who's a character we haven't used yet? Bishop? Okay, let's throw him into this movie even though he has nothing to do in this story. I really feel like with X-Men Days of Future Past, the story that they are working with is a really great story. It's a classic story from the comic books. Even though they are changing up quite a few of the elements for the movie, I'm fine with that. I think it's still going to be a great story. My problem with this movie is that they've got something like 25 named characters, and I would say 10 of them are ultimately going to be very pointless. We don't need to see Rogue, Storm, Kitty Pryde, or Iceman. We don't need to see Warpath or Bishop or Quicksilver or Blink. I think all of those characters are going to be very useless. They're basically going to have a cameo where they say, hey, remember I was in this franchise 10 years ago. And I don't really think anyone is begging to see that. I don't think people want to see that in these movies. I myself, I wanted to see the First Class characters get developed more. I wanted to see even more done with Professor Xavier and Magneto, and I wanted to see actually something done with Banshee and Havoc. Ultimately, we're not going to get that. We will get more with Professor Xavier and Magneto. We are going to get more with Beast and Mystique, but the characters who basically weren't characters, who were just kind of there to fill up the background, those guys are not going to have anything to do in this movie. And I feel like that is a shame. I don't know if anyone else is really upset about this. I wouldn't even say I'm upset. I'm just mildly aggravated. I am still going to go and watch Days of Future Past. I'm probably going to enjoy it quite a bit, even if it ends up not being a fantastic movie. I feel like if it's as good as First Class, I'm going to be really happy. It's probably not going to be the best movie in the world. I think at this point, seeing everything that I have already seen, where they just like to say, oh, guess what? Eunice the Untouchable is going to be showing up in this movie next. I feel like with that mentality, they are not on their way to making a fantastic movie. They are on their way to making something that is all about fan service first and a great movie second. So I'm curious, what do you guys have to say about this? Do you agree with me? Do you disagree? Let me know in the comments below. Are you excited to see this movie? Let me know also in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, I encourage you to like, share, comment, and subscribe. And I will be back tomorrow with a different kind of video. So until then, I'll see you guys later. Have a great day.